the auction yard was filled with the low murmur of men and the creak of wooden boards under dusty boots. The air was dry, thick with heat and humiliation. Among the rows of frightened faces, one woman stood trembling, her fingers clasped so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her name was Clara Holt, a widow, barely 24. With hair the color of autumn wheat and eyes that still held a trace of kindness, even after life had stripped her of almost everything. Her husband had died 2 winters ago. A miner who left her nothing but debts and whispers. And when she couldn't conceive, when the townsfolk started calling her barren, even the families who had once pitied her turned their backs. In those times, a woman without a husband or a child was as good as invisible. Or worse, property to be sold off. And that's what this was. A sale. Lot 9, the auctioneer shouted, voice cutting through the chatter. Widow, young, healthy, trained in housework. Can't bear children. The way he said it, like announcing a flaw in a horse, made her insides twist. Laughter rippled through the crowd. The bids began, low and cruel. $20. $30. A ranch hand in a sweat-stained hat smirked. Ain't much use if she can't give 'em a legacy. Clara lowered her gaze, praying the ground would swallow her. And then, the crowd parted. A tall man stepped forward. His stride slow but certain. A small child perched on his hip. His clothes were dust-worn. His jaw shadowed with days of silence. But there was a steadiness in his eyes, a deep, still strength that made even the loudest men go quiet. $50, he said. Heads turned. The auctioneer hesitated. Sir, she's. I know what she is, the men said simply. And just like that, the gavel struck wood. Sold. To Mr. Elias Kane of Willow Creek Ranch. Clara's breath caught. She didn't know whether to thank him or run. He didn't say a word as he guided her to his wagon. The child on his arm, a little girl with golden curls, peeked shyly over his shoulder, clutching a worn blanket. Clara smiled softly. The girl smiled back. They rode in silence for nearly an hour, the sound of the wagon wheels echoing down the dirt road. Finally, Clara gathered the courage to speak. Sir, you didn't have to do that. Elias's eyes stayed on the horizon. Maybe not. Why did you? She asked quietly. He looked at his daughter for a long moment before answering. My girl needs someone. And maybe. So do you. Something unspoken passed between them, an understanding forged not by words, but by 2 broken lives crossing paths. When they reached the ranch, Clara was stunned. Acres of golden fields stretched into the distance, dotted with grazing horses and the faint silhouette of a red barn. Yet the beauty was shadowed by loneliness. The house looked lived in, but barely. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and dust. Toys lay scattered in the corner. And a single photograph sat on the mantel, Elias's late wife, smiling, holding their baby girl. Clara hesitated, unsure of her place. Elias noticed. You can take the spare room upstairs, he said, setting his daughter down. I'll pay you fair for your work. You're not here as a servant. She looked up, startled. Then why bring me? He sighed. Because this house hasn't heard laughter in a long time. That night, as Clara tucked the little girl, Lily, into bed, something in her chest cracked open. The child looked up sleepily and whispered, Mama used to sing me songs. Clara's throat tightened. She hesitated, then began to hum softly, an old lullaby her own mother once sang. Lily's eyes fluttered closed, her tiny hand clutching Clara's. Elias stood in the doorway, unseen, his heart aching in ways he hadn't felt in years. Days turned into weeks. Clara worked quietly, keeping the house warm and filled with the smell of baking bread. She taught Lily how to braid flowers into her hair and read bedtime stories by the firelight. Slowly, the cold silence that had haunted the ranch began to fade. But the town didn't forget. At the general store, whispers followed her. Can't have children, yet living under a man's roof. She'll trap him somehow, mark my words. Clara kept her head down, but the words stung. She thought Elias might regret his decision. Yet when he saw her one evening, wiping tears as she shelled peas on the porch, he sat beside her without a word. I heard them, he said quietly. She flinched. It doesn't matter. Yes, it does, he said. You didn't deserve what happened to you. No woman does. She blinked hard, refusing to cry. I can't give anyone a child, Elias. I'll never be a real wife to any man. He looked at her then, not the way other men had, but as if he saw straight into her soul. You don't have to give life to be full of it, he said. You already make this place feel alive. Her breath caught. For the first time in years, someone saw her as more than her emptiness. One night, a storm tore across the valley, rain hammering the roof, wind screaming through the cracks. Lightning flashed, and Lily's frightened cry pierced the dark. Clara rushed to her room, pulling the child close. Shoo, baby. I'm here. The little girl clung to her neck. I thought you'd go away like Mama. Her heart broke. Never, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere. Elias appeared at the doorway, water dripping from his hat, his eyes soft with something between gratitude and pain. He watched Clara cradle his daughter, whispering comfort like she'd been born to do it. Later, when the storm passed, he sat by the fire with her. You've given my girl something I couldn't, he said. Peace. Clara smiled faintly. And you've given me something I thought I'd lost. What's that? A reason to stay. Silence fell, deep and warm. Then, as if afraid to break the moment, Elias reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. The next morning, when the sun rose over Willow Creek, it didn't feel like another ordinary day. Clara woke to the sound of laughter, the rare kind that fills every empty space. Lily was running across the yard, chasing chickens, her little voice ringing through the air. Elias stood at the fence, watching her. When Clara stepped out with a cup of coffee, he turned and said quietly, You could have left any time. But you didn't. I didn't want to, she replied softly. He took a slow breath. Then stay. Not for the pay. Not out of duty. Stay because this is your home now. Clara froze, tears welling. You'd want me here. Knowing I can't. He stepped closer, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. You've already given me more than any child could. You gave me hope again. She smiled through her tears, the rising sun catching her face, making her look like she belonged to that light. From that day forward, the whispers of the town no longer mattered. They saw her riding beside Elias, her laughter mingling with lilies in the open fields. They saw how the once empty ranch now thrived with warmth, love, and a family that had been reborn, not by blood, but by grace. And when someone dared to ask Elias why he'd taken in a barren widow, he only smiled and said, Because some souls were never meant to be alone, and some homes are built with love, not lineage. That evening, as the sunset painted the sky in gold and rose, Clara stood on the porch holding Lily close, the ranch glowing behind them. She looked out across the fields, whispering to herself, Maybe I wasn't meant to bear life. Maybe I was meant to heal it. The wind carried her words into the horizon, where they would linger like a promise. And as the night settled over Willow Creek Ranch, one thing became clear, she wasn't worthless. She was wanted. She was home.